Welcome to the Community Conversations podcast, where we believe that world transformation begins with gospel transformation, and gospel transformation begins with discovering the truth about who God is and who you are. And it starts right now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. I am excited today. He's had a few weeks off, but
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, he's back. Noah Chant.
Yeah, I was about to say well rested, but I'm not.
Right.
It's on a restful break. But yeah, good to be back.
Yeah.
Good to be back or starting the flow of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time realizing that you're never going to get like your full routine back for a little, at least till he's about 8 weeks old. That's when he'll really start kind of sleeping all night. But until then, it's just kind of
Yeah.
just making it.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
but I'm here,
Yeah.
a little bit of coffee, a little bit of energy.
Yeah. Yeah. How's it been going?
It's great. He's great, healthy, good. He's hilarious. It's been. I think it's still surreal.
Yeah.
I don't know when it or how it sets in that it's your kid, because I could just look at him for hours,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's still like a lot of just surreal. And there's things. The interesting thing about a child is things that would normally frustrate you, like that would be like, man, like I hate being up right now. When they're with you, you're like, you just don't care.
Yeah.
You're just happy,
Yep.
He loves to lay on my chest and like it's his favorite place. You just crash.
Mm-hmm.
And normally like not being able to move for like an hour would infuriate me, but
Yeah.
just him just kind of laying, mouth open, just passed out's been the best. So it's
Yeah.
been fun.
Yeah.
He's healthy and I'm happy, and so
Yeah.
we had a really, really, really great experience
Yeah.
having him, and so it's been fun.
Yeah. That's so fun. I love it. I
Yeah.
love all of it.
It's great. I'm excited.
Yeah.
It has a lot of little friends being born over the next 6 to 8 months here.
Yeah. I mean, just in our community group alone, we've got 3 boys coming.
Yeah, I think we got five babies total, or 5 more left total, and 4 confirmed boys. And
Yeah.
the 5th, everyone believes is a boy. So
Yeah.
another round here of boys.
Yeah. Which we've needed because we've had nothing but girls
Yeah,
at our church.
yeah, we need husbands. We need husbands. We're gonna have a
Yeah.
lot of weirdly age gapped marriages.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's fun though. I guess so as of today recording this, Katie and I we'll go have our anatomy scan to confirm.
Nice.
We did the
Big
blood
day.
test, but
Yeah. Make sure it's a boy.
we'll get some pics. Yeah, we'll make sure.
We'll know on next week's podcast if Brian's kind of real teary eyed and depressed if it's a third girl. Yeah, and and Benjamin's 3 weeks today, so it's a big day.
Wow.
It's weird.
That doesn't seem right.
I know, it feels so weird. 3
Yeah.
weeks old. Week of Easter, he'll be a month old.
Wow.
Which when you're like reading, I've read just a bunch of baby books, and when you're reading through them, you're like, it'll like go through like weeks 1 and 2, and then it'll kind of go like week 4 to week 8, and you're thinking, well, that's forever away.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just kind of honing in on like weeks 1 and 2,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh, actually, I'm in like the weeks 4 to 8 now, which is like weird. I've been reading some yesterday
Yeah.
on just like the next kind of set of things
Yeah.
to prepare him for. So it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy. Okay. Let's dive in.
All right, it's a good episode. We'll
All
see y'all
right,
next
we'll
week.
see you guys. That's all we've got. Last week, closing out the episode with Katie, I kind of mentioned I wanted to lean in towards, which we kind of went there anyways a little bit, but start leaning in towards the topic of law versus grace
Yeah,
with regard to the gospel. And we've been talking a little bit about things that would prevent us from fully experiencing all that the gospel means for us and all that
Sure.
Jesus really, really accomplished.
sure.
One of those things being just the unrenewed mind,
Yeah,
it's kind of a big deal.
that'll help. That'll kind of help navigate you through.
Right. Yeah. It turns out you got to think like him if you want to, do what he did.
Yeah, or at least allow him to change your thinking,
Yeah. Right.
and then think like him.
Yeah.
Just surrender to that.
Right. Yeah. You've got to admit that it's possible that I don't really know all I need to know.
Yeah,
So would you help me?
right.
Yeah. But another major stumbling block, which I can't wait to talk about, is just the way that we've mixed law with grace with regard to the gospel. We've got a little mixture going. And
Yeah.
the thing about that
Little
is
leaven.
like a little leaven leavens the whole lump.
Yeah.
So you get 2% law in there,
Right.
and it kind of it takes the whole thing off course.
It does. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You can't use shame and something, and you can't use rules and something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you just can't. It's not how you can't have a little bit of both.
Right. Yeah. And so we're going to get into that. I have a lot of scripture. I'll probably paraphrase some of it.
Yeah.
Just so we're not spending the whole hour just reading.
Right.
But in Genesis 16, and so Genesis 16, we see Abraham is wanting a son. It's not happened with Sarah yet.
Right.
And so in Genesis 16 is when the story comes where they take it into their own hands. Right.
Yeah.
And so Sarah's like, well, we've got this slave woman, Hagar.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think? Maybe, it's not working out with me. Maybe give it a shot with her and see if we can get you a son, somehow.
I think it's a good tip for marriage too. If you're not having a kid, don't let your husband sleep with somebody else.
Right.
I like that. That's what I'm building a marriage conference around.
Right.
It's just don't let them sleep with anybody else.
It turns out it doesn't end well.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work well. It doesn't create good family dynamics in the household. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. So that's Genesis 16. And then you skip forward to 21. And in chapter 21, that's when the promise to Sarah that she will conceive and give birth. That's when we see that fulfilled.
Yeah.
And so in Genesis 21, if I'm paraphrasing, that promise is fulfilled. And you kind of read, and Isaac is born, and as he grows up a little bit, you come to this section where it's really interesting. It's one that I as many times as I've read it in Genesis, it's something I think, at least for me, like you kind of gloss over. There's a lot of things that you don't really, that just don't really capture your attention or, stand out to you as something that, you need to take note of.
Yeah.
And one of those things being that so when Isaac is, as he grows up, there's weaning day, right? There's a day where he's weaned.
Right.
And that, I guess, I don't know if that was like a big deal in their culture, but it says that Abraham, like, he made a feast. Like, it was a celebration.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's really not manhood.
Yeah.
Like, we wouldn't associate that with manhood, but it must have meant something to them.
It meant something to them.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, Abraham throws this great feast, and it's like a celebration. It's weaning day. And it says that Ishmael, he's older. I don't know if you would know roughly how old he would be at this point.
13.
So he was 13 at this point. Okay.
Around there, yeah. 12 to 13.
So he was a good bit older. And so here you've got baby Isaac, just a little thing.
Yeah.
And at least to him. And so it says that he starts laughing. And some translations would say that he mocks Isaac.
Yeah.
Stupid kid,
Yeah, don't make fun of a child when their parents are around either. That's another good rule.
Right.
'Cause Sarah hears. Yeah.
And what's so interesting is that, and she tells Abraham they've got to go.
Yeah, kick them out.
Both of them, Hagar and Ishmael,
Yeah.
they've got to go. And Abraham's not like super pleased about that.
Right.
It says that he's displeased, and like Ishmael is his son. Not with Sarah, but
Yeah, I mean, it's your blood. It's your flesh and blood, man. It's got to be difficult.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter like what era of people you are. It's still got to be painful.
Right. Yeah. And
Very
so,
painful.
Yeah. And so he's displeased, but then the Lord's like, she's right.
Yeah, totally.
The Lord jumps in. He's like, they do have to go.
Well, yeah. I mean, anytime and I think there's so many, obviously, like theoretical things you can look at with that and analogies. But anytime we fabricate for ourselves the promises he's giving us,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I think, especially from like a ministry perspective, that's really easy to do.
Yeah.
So this is what he has planned for us.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And so, well, it's not working the way I thought. Maybe I'll just kind of
Right.
do this or hype this up or add this and try to fabricate this thing.
Yep.
Even in my life, like or even not in my life, but even in people's lives, like oftentimes you see people end up even marrying wrong people because they've been promised someone from the Lord and, well, this is the only person available. So I'll just fabricate whatever probably the Lord was promising with this. And so we do that all the time.
Yeah, we do.
And it hurts when you have to let that go because you did work at it.
Mm-hmm.
So it hurts for Abraham.
Yeah.
this is my son. Like it says, he taught him how to hunt, and he,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like either they spent time together, you know,
Yeah.
like it wasn't like he was way over there all the time. You know,
Right.
they were close.
Yeah. Yep. And so, yeah, the Lord jumps in and he's like, Abraham, he's like, they do have to go.
Yeah.
You know, Isaac he's the one.
He's the guy.
He's the guy. So Abraham does it, and he sends Hagar and Ishmael off. And, you know, there's more to that story. But then what's so interesting about all that is, again, you could read that and not really notice or think too much of that whole story. But then you get into Galatians 4, and this is where it gets really fun. Galatians 4 is so fun to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to read about 10 verses here.
Okay.
So this is starting in verse 21, Galatians 4. Paul says, "Tell me, you who desire to be under the law, do you not listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. But the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman was born through promise. Now this may be interpreted allegorically. These women are 2 covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. She is Hagar. Now Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. She corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother." I'm going to jump to verse 28. "Now you, brothers, like Isaac, are children of promise. But just as at that time he who was born according to the flesh persecuted him who was born according to the Spirit, so also it is now. But what does the Scripture say? Cast out the slave woman and her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not inherit with the son of the free woman. So, brothers, we are not children of the slave, but of the free woman."
This is the word of the Lord.
This is the word of the Lord.
Yeah.
If you'll stand with me. So here you've got Paul saying, hey, remember all that stuff that happened?
Yeah, he brings out he really pulls like a real pastoral move and says, let me give you an allegory of this.
Right.
You know, when he shows Hagar as the law,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And then really there's a word that Brian Simmons uses in his translation where he talks about that Ishmael represents self-effort,
Yeah.
you know? And there's this sign of like the law constantly produces the need for self-effort.
Right.
In my own salvation, in my own sanctification, holiness. It's always about me,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
Then there's this other side of the promise,
Right.
you know? It's longer.
Yeah.
It's feels scarier to wait on.
Yep.
But overall, what ends up happening is it's so weird because what the Lord said he would do, he does.
Right.
That's what it always is.
Right.
What the Lord says he will do, he will do,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. But how often do we not get to experience the fulfillment of those promises because we do take things into our own hands?
Sure.
Like you said.
Yeah.
It's really easy to, even think about your parents sat on a prophetic word for what, 25, 30 years?
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
About planting, yeah.
How easy would it have been for them to get like 5 or 10 years in and say well, this isn't happening the way, so let's just go ahead.
Let's just leave, or
let's just leave,
or it wasn't real.
Yes, or that.
You know, it's hard, and the reality is when we read Scripture now, it feels like the easy, logical decision. Well, you've got Isaac, so get rid of Ishmael.
Sure.
But live in that time, in that moment, with a son that looks like you, and send him away.
Right.
See if you can do it.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot harder to get rid of what we produce through self-effort than we realize. And oftentimes we won't actually make that sacrifice.
Right.
We were actually, you know what I mean? We refuse to. And so we'll live in this this scaling and this balancing act of what was given to me through promise and what was given to me through self-effort. And we'll never push what was not meant to be out.
Right.
It's an exhausting way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. And consider, the circumstances. Like Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born.
Yeah.
Sarah was, I forget what it says she was exactly. She was in her 90s.
Old.
Yeah. So take that into consideration too. What that would have been like for Abraham.
Oh my gosh.
You've never seen a 90-year-old woman, 90-some-odd-year-old woman.
No.
Give birth. And so.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think the temptation and like the fun church thing to do is like, well, God works through the like illogical and that's true, you know. And sometimes just look the way and that's true too. But like the true nature of this story is when the Lord says something, He will do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's logical or illogical or if it happens in 100 years. Like you know what I mean. When He says it, He'll do it. You know, I use that in my own prayer language. Like, Lord, like you have been faithful in everything you say you have done and everything you have told me you have done or will do. And I thank you for that, because there's this idea of like He is faithful.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what. And if you read in Romans, I think it's 3 or 4. Paul is trying to get the Church of Rome to understand imputed righteousness, that they're now has become as righteous as God. And the way he does that is to use another allegory of Abraham and say that Abraham simply believed the words of the Lord and it was counted to him as righteousness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is simply belief in who God is and what He will do. Like, that's the story here.
Yeah.
Is believe God.
Right.
Believe Him.
Yeah.
You know, what He says, what He's telling you, what you're feeling from Him. Like, just believe it.
Yeah.
I know it feels weird and hard.
Yep.
But there's a truth there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's self-effort versus surrender
Yeah.
and trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. But, you know, and so you look at these two allegories, or this allegory, and you're looking at Ishmael and you're looking at Isaac, and you realize that, you know, Ishmael, on the one hand, he does represent, you know, the law, and he represents self-effort.
Yeah.
And he represents all those things. And then you've got Isaac, on the other hand, that represents the true promise.
Yeah.
Right. And he represents grace.
Grace. Yeah.
And he represents surrender, and he represents trust.
Yeah.
And then, then Paul says, and, you know, he says, and what do the scriptures tell us to do? To cast out the woman and her son.
Yeah.
And so what he's saying is, guys, we can't go mixing law with grace.
No.
To any degree.
No.
With the gospel, because
we have to eradicate it.
We have to eradicate it. It has to be cast out completely.
Uh-huh.
And it's not until we figure out how to completely cast out the law from our idea of what the gospel is.
Yeah.
It's not until we can cast that out completely that we'll actually get to experience the fullness of our inheritance.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's I think so much of this we want to lean back in through our own like legalism or religion or the way we grew up. We want to lean this stuff back into a heaven or hell issue.
Right.
And the reality, this is important for how you live now.
Right.
This has really little to do with being saved.
Yeah.
You can be saved and still try to not eat, you know, bacon.
Right.
You know, as long as you believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, like you can follow rules all you want. It's not about that, but it's the reality of the fullness of what you've been designed for is actually built out of relational equity. And relational equity is found through grace first.
Right.
There are things that become something, the standards of your living. Doesn't mean there's things you do and don't do.
Right.
But those are found through the teachings of Jesus, but also they're found through the partnership of the Holy Spirit. And that type of it's not even, it is obedience, but that type of devotion, I think is a better word, is found through relational equity, not through the law.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's devotion, not rules.
Right.
And those are just different.
They are.
There's things I do for Bailey, you know what I mean? Out of devotion. It's not a rule.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And almost on the outside, it can look, it can be hard to discern whether or not what somebody's doing is religious or it's done out of love. Because even like the stuff that Jesus rebuked the Pharisees for, the things they were doing weren't bad.
No.
He didn't rebuke them, or he didn't tell them to not be generous. He didn't tell them to not pray. He just said, don't do it in the way that the Pharisees do.
Right. It's a heart posture thing.
It is a heart posture thing.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
like praying and fasting, he says. Remember, they
Yes.
fast in public. They look all,
and they make themselves look, yeah. And so, and it is a heart posture thing.
Yeah.
It's not as, what I'm finding is that like with religion, it's not always what you're doing as much as it is why you're doing it. Yeah. You can have two people who both pray and they both fast and they both give generously. And one of them can be doing it, postured out of like self-effort, as if trying to like earn
Yeah.
something. And the other one's like, oh, I just love the Lord and I understand who he
Sure.
is and I just want to be close to him.
Well, we need to break down, and I talked to, when I was teaching the staff a couple weeks ago, I talked about the difference of self-effort versus effort,
Yes,
and they're different,
they are. Yeah.
right? So like self-effort is built out of my ability to do something to gain.
Right.
Like self-effort is my ability to go, I know if I do this, he'll love me. If I do this, I'm in.
Yeah.
If I do this, I'm good. I'm a good boy. I'm not a bad boy anymore. Like I've done this. Effort is my ability to go, man, I love this person. So how do I show that love now?
Yeah. That's really
I'm
good.
using effort. You know what I mean? And there's this great line from Willard that we use all the time. And it's grace is not opposed to effort. Grace is opposed to earning.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
That's it.
Grace is not opposed to effort. It's just opposed to earning. And earning is self-effort.
Right.
That's when I use my own abilities to go to present my report card and go, oh, look what I've done. You know what I mean? I've done this stuff for you.
Yeah.
Where effort is just going, hey, like, we're doing this together.
Yeah.
So what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
I'm in. I love you. I'll
Yeah.
do it. You know what I mean? And that doesn't take, I think oftentimes we get caught up in going, okay, so self-effort means I can't do anything. No. It means you can't earn anything.
Yeah. Right.
Effort is not earning. You know what I mean? It's just simply just desire and devotion.
Right.
I'm devoted to this guy. I love the Lord.
Yep.
And so I want to understand how to do this. And I know that he knows what it means to be human.
Right.
And so to devote myself to him is to have truly a human experience.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We are not, and we're going to talk about this even when we do our spiritual formation weekend, but we're not humans having a spiritual experience. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Right.
And he's the key to having a human experience. And so that even like pushes me into devotion, not law.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's hard because we often want to assume that kicking out Ishmael and Hagar is simply the rebellious act of going like screw the church.
Right.
Screw this, man.
Right.
Yeah. Woo, we did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's really like a woo, we're rebellious, aren't we? You know, we're posting our thing on the door of the church, you know, nailing our
Yeah.
thesis here to the wall of the
Right.
church or the doors of the church. And it's like, that's not what it's about. It's actually about continuing to strive to cultivate what the church was designed to be. And this idea is not about moving more into lawlessness. It's actually more about moving into submission.
Right.
You know, because I think the law was, I'm Lord no matter what, so you better listen. And I think grace is, I am the Lord, but it's your choice if you want my lordship.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a big deal.
You know, that's actually one verse that I always found really interesting. The way Brian Simmons translated it is the verse that we know, and I don't remember the reference, but it's where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom.
Yeah.
Well, he translated it from the Aramaic that says, it doesn't say where the Spirit of the Lord is. It's where the Spirit is Lord, there is freedom.
Oh, wow.
You know, I always found
That's really good.
I always found that really
I
interesting.
don't think I've ever noticed that.
Yeah, but where the Spirit is Lord, that's where there's freedom.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because that's
You know?
true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's a lordship.
Yeah.
It's a lordship issue. And his lordship over me should not feel burdensome.
Right.
It should invoke repentance. It should invoke moments of, man, like, yeah, I got that wrong, didn't I? Like that thought process really probably wasn't the best.
Yeah.
But overall, it should not invoke in me like, God, this is hard.
Right.
I hate this so much.
Well, the yoke is easy,
Yeah.
you know?
His burden is light.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's this idea that his lordship is actually a comforting thing. You know, David says, your rod comforts me, which a rod is used for discipline,
Sure.
you know, and used for direction. But, like,
Yeah.
it's a comforting thing to know that somebody has you. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, like, I'm sure it's funny. I'm probably going to start using way too many, like, baby things now.
It's hard not to,
Oh
man.
my God.
It's right there. Like,
I'm
what are
about
you
to
going to
become
do?
the worst trope ever. Hate myself already. But the reality is this. Benjamin already, in small, tiny moments, fights sleep.
Sure.
And it's like, I know you think this is better to stay awake right now.
Right.
I know you think, I don't know what kind of FOMO you're dealing with at 2 weeks old, but whatever it is, I know you think it's better. But there is this comforting thing in lordship where when he finally goes, maybe sleep is the way,
Mm-hmm.
and he passes out,
Yeah.
and he's on your chest, and he's like, and there's this comfort of like, thank God you're Lord.
Yeah. Right.
Thank God you're dad and I'm not.
Yeah.
Because I'd just be up, just crying because I'm angry, because I'm tired, and
Right.
I'm hungry now because I've been screaming so much. Like,
Mhm.
there's this like relaxation of like, oh, thank God you're Lord.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want to make all the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to. I've tried to define my own sexuality, my own finances, my own way of living, my own philosophy. I've tried all that. It's exhausting and it did not work well. I'm pretty dumb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I've enjoyed his lordship.
Yeah.
And that's not law for me, that's grace.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to get rid of the concept that it was about following rules
Right.
and not following someone,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that sense of relief that you're talking about, that comes on the other end of submission and obedience.
For sure.
You know?
For sure.
You finally say, okay, I'll try it your way.
Yeah.
And you actually go through, you go through something and you realize,
Well,
turns out you were right.
that worked.
You were right, bud.
Yeah, that worked well, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's hard because it's hard because no matter how much oftentimes we still have this idea, we still are fighting this idea often that what the Lord wants is for his good, not mine.
Right.
Like the Lord wants me to do what he wants because that's what he likes.
Mm-hmm.
But it's sacrificing me of what I want.
Right.
Right? That's kind of the
Yeah.
underlying thing we live with is like, oh my God, the Lord wants me to be like this, but that will make me so unhappy. But I know it's what he wants, so I'll do what he wants.
Right.
It's like it's like a really bad marriage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's
Yeah.
like, oh man, so this is what my husband wants me to wear. My husband likes when I have blonde hair, so I'll just have blonde hair forever.
Yeah. Right.
And it's, the reality is more, no, that's not it. It's actually he knows me better than I know myself.
Right.
And what he has designed for me oftentimes is, it can honestly sometimes feel like it's more for my good than even his.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know it's probably not, but it feels that way.
Yeah.
Because when you finally get into it, you're like, oh man,
Yeah.
this is it.
Yeah.
I love this,
Yeah. And I think honestly, I think it's mutual though, that like what he wants for us is for our own good, but in the long term, it's also good for him too.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Because if we're living in obedience and submission to him, we'll be doing things that will cultivate, his kingdom here on earth.
100%.
And so it's like a win-win,
Yeah. Well, and two, like, I think we undervalue God's simple desire out of our life, like out of our lifespan, to be about friendship.
Yeah.
David Wagner, I will use this line over and over again. He says, God's desire for you is to become a fully mature son who becomes a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're often unaware that God's desire is for us to be in deep relation.
Right.
And so most of his goals for me are not based out of financial gain
Mm-hmm.
or platform gain
Mm-hmm.
or even like making sure that like I'm preaching the gospel.
Yeah.
I think all that's great. But I think like his individual goal for people is to go like, I want to be in deep relationship with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to walk with you, talk with you. I want
Yeah.
you to enjoy what we have as much as I currently do.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
like the long-term goal for him,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Let's pause real quick.
Sure.
We'll take a quick break. Hear a word from our sponsor. We'll be right back.
Bingo.
Are you in the market for top-notch packaging solutions? Look no further. Introducing Associated Packaging, your trusted partner in packaging excellence. We specialize in providing high-quality packaging supplies and cutting-edge packaging automation. Our team is dedicated to ensuring your production runs smoothly with our factory-trained service technicians, just-in-time inventory management, and turnkey packaging solutions. Say goodbye to costly downtime. With Associated Packaging, you'll maximize uptime and reduce downtime, boosting your efficiency and profitability. Don't compromise on packaging quality and efficiency. Choose API for all your packaging needs. Call us today at 706-459-9996. Ask for Chad Balistrary or visit our website at www.associatedpackaging.com. Associated Packaging, where packaging excellence meets innovation.
Okay, we're back.
Bingo.
Poor Izzy's not feeling well today.
Yes, we had
So-
to take a sick break.
Take a little sick break. Check on little Izzy.
Check on little Izzy,
She's watching Winnie the Pooh upstairs.
a girl after my own heart.
Yeah. She I was telling you during the break, but it's crazy. She'll get sick and she'll bounce back in about 12 hours.
Yeah,
A lot of times.
isn't that fantastic?
Yeah. It's
I'm
crazy.
I'm down. I don't get sick very often. When I
Mhm.
do, I'm down for the count. It's like I
Yeah.
have to get it in and get it out.
Yeah. Yep. The whole event.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyways, we're back. Let's I've got a few other scriptures I want to read on this topic. First, let's go to here's Romans 10, 1 through 4. Paul says, "Brothers, my heart's desire and prayer to God for them is that they may be saved. For I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. For Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes." And I love the way he put that he says, "For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own."
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, I get that.
Right.
I've been there. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, and I think in the same way that we say that we have a hard time believing that like we carry God's righteousness, in that same sentence, what you're saying is that I need to be righteous, so I'm going to make myself righteous.
Right.
To say I'm not as
Yeah.
righteous as God, or I don't carry God's righteousness now,
Right.
is to actively say I'm making myself righteous
Mm-hmm.
and saying my righteousness is enough.
Right.
And so oftentimes I think it sounds more heretical to say like you've become as righteous as God, you carry God's righteousness, it's been imputed onto you through the blood of Jesus.
Yeah.
And you hear those things and you're like, God, that sounds like heresy.
Yeah.
But what's actual heresy and what's worse is to say, that's not true. I have my righteousness and that's enough to get me in.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's actually a worse statement to make.
It's basically, it's as if to say like what Jesus did wasn't enough. It didn't cut it.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
need to work at establishing our own righteousness.
Yeah, I need to get involved and do some stuff in this process
Right.
to get it where I want to get it. And that's
Yeah.
not the case.
Right.
We're ignorant to the idea of righteousness.
Right.
You know, the writer of Hebrews says the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, that you are like infants still drinking milk,
Yeah.
you know, but food is for the spiritually mature.
Yep.
And because you are, like the ESV would say, unskilled in righteousness,
Right.
or, you know, like the Passion translations, because it's leaving me now, but
You've not been pierced.
you've not been pierced by righteousness.
Yeah.
Like this is the reality of why you're suffering with what you're suffering with.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And that is the natural progression for people who desire righteousness but are ignorant of God's righteousness. The natural progression is I want to be righteous. There's this like internal longing for that, right?
Right.
But when we're ignorant of God's righteousness, the next natural step that we would take is to try to establish our own.
Yes.
And of course, how do we do that? We do that through self-effort
Right.
and through the law.
Yeah. And in the Old Testament, we see when people try that, their righteousness is as filthy rags.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
my own ability, and we've talked about this at Noxium, but we talked about this idea of, righteousness, dikainousene, is to be in the state that one ought to be in. It is to be made into the person that you were designed to be,
Right.
to be who you were
Yeah.
and who you are. And like when I try to define, and that's what I never try to get like political or in current affairs just because it's losing game. But the reality is that is the current fight, is people going, this is who I am and I'm going to define myself.
Right.
It is the exact like moment of defining my own righteousness. my own right way of doing things.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's wrong.
Right. And
That's not right.
I think it's fair to say that like every person, like everybody has that internal longing to understand their identity. And that's why there's, and that's why so much of like the political agenda today is geared towards finding ways for people to communicate their identity
Yeah.
and to discover what that means for them, because we do have that internal longing. We want to know who we are. We want to know, what does that mean in its fullness?
Yeah, 100%. And it's just there's just this weird reality when trying to be humble, we oftentimes just end up ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we use these ideas like, I can't be like this. I
Yeah.
can't be like Jesus. I can't be like that. It's not humility, it's ignorance.
Yeah. Right.
You're just, you have an unawareness at what the Lord is doing through you and in you by him.
Mm-hmm.
And saying that you're not like him or not becoming like him is not your humility. It's your unbelief in who he is and what he did.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just not, it's not it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the gospel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not.
It's not the good news. This is not the way. And that's this idea of kicking Hagar and Ishmael out, kicking out the law. The law's sole purpose was to say, here's a set of things that can make you righteous.
Right. Yeah.
Here's a list of rules that if you want to follow, you can become righteous.
Right.
We'll start with 12. We'll move up to about 600.
Right.
We'll go from there.
Yeah.
And this idea is no one could do it.
Right.
It's going to be impossible for you. And so to humbly lay and say, like, I'm just my righteousness, filthy rags. Yeah, that's why you don't have yours anymore.
Right.
You have God's.
That's why Jesus came.
That's why Jesus came.
Right.
Like, you're missing the whole point.
Right.
And so it's very hard, and it's hard in our brains because it's a different way of thinking about things. I get that.
It is.
It's a different way of understanding things.
Yep.
But we have to get out of thinking that this is that we're being humble when really most of the time we're just being ignorant.
Right. Yeah. And it's hard because it doesn't feel like our experience, to say that like we are as righteous as God. It's especially, and I think because we've been on this topic for so long, even personally, we've been digging deep into what this really means.
Sure.
But it's hard when you kind of start venturing into these waters of understanding what it means to have become the righteousness of God, to be as righteous as Jesus is.
Yeah.
It's hard because that seems to contradict our experience. And
Yes.
that's where our minds have a hard time going is, well, why doesn't it feel that way? Why haven't I acted that way?
Right.
And it's like, well, let me introduce you to grace and,
Tale
and
as
right,
old as
and
time.
right believing,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's at the end of the day, we've been taught so much one way. You can't hear one thing and go, oh, okay, great.
Right.
Flip a switch.
Mm-hmm.
It is not how it works.
Yeah.
It's the journey of the gospel alone is enough of a journey. Then when you throw on all the bad things and wrong things that we've been taught that we have to that we have to be, untaught.
Right.
It's a journey now.
Yeah.
It's a hard way of understanding this, but it is like it's a constant battle of, okay, it's him, it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
It's about him, it's not about me.
Right.
It's what he did, it's not about what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my partnership in what he did. And that's a hard thing because we want to go like, why aren't I feeling it? It's because you don't believe it.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's all it is. You just don't believe it. I don't either.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I have it.
Right.
But the reality is there's just pieces of me in unbelief about how good he is and how powerful what he did on the cross truly is.
Right.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's more than you could imagine what actually happened. What became available now to us through that process.
Yeah.
It's just it literally, like, you guys talked about the reformation of your mind. It really is.
Yeah.
It's a total different way about thinking about existing.
Right.
Totally new way of thinking about how you exist.
Yep.
And it's very hard, I think, for us as individuals, especially when, nowadays we're independent and we have unique thoughts and everything's more about individuality than ever before.
Yeah.
It's very hard for us to become person dependent.
Sure.
But Jesus is the ultimate person to become person dependent upon.
Right. Yeah.
Even our marriage, you see this kind of perversion now in marriage in the Western world of I'm married, but we have our own bank accounts.
Yeah.
We have our own
Right.
lives. We do our own things. We're
Yep.
married, but we're not dependent upon each other. That would be awful.
Right.
It's well, that's kind of what the whole thing is.
Yeah.
And we hate the thought process of now becoming dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to figure this out for myself.
Right.
And Jesus is going, no,
Yeah.
nope, I got it. I already did it.
Yeah.
Just come hang out with me. Just come be with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the thief on the cross had to do was say, you are the Lord. And he says, great.
Yeah.
Then today you join me in paradise.
Yeah. Right.
It's that simple.
Right.
And it's hard because we create all these hurdles of unbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sometimes as simple as just hey, okay, it's just you
Yeah.
and your righteousness and your ways and your holiness. It's not mine anymore.
Yep.
And I accept yours, but I'm going to need to understand how and why.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not trying to. One of the things I feel like I've learned with the Lord the past couple of years is I'm not trying to learn theological things or ideas, or I'm not trying to learn the secrets of Christ and then come to him and go, look, I learned this.
Right.
Instead, I'm going hey, I don't get this, so you're going to have to show me. And I make him teach me. I don't make him, but I ask him to teach me.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not looking to discover it and go, look, I did it. I figured it out. I'm going, hey, you're just going to have to. You're going to have to do it.
You're going to have to help me out
It's not
here
making
because
any
it's
sense to me.
right.
And that is what he's looking for.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking for the worst codependent person ever. That's what he kind of wants out of us is this idea of hey, if he gets up off the couch, where are you going?
Uh-huh.
That's what he wants. You going to the bathroom? Okay, I'll come with you. That's what
Right.
That's his desire.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what relationally he's looking for is codependency.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Follow me.
Follow me.
That's it.
Simple.
Yeah.
Very simple idea.
Right.
And, I think he modeled that well with the apostles of hey, I'm going to go be strengthened in the wilderness for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, where I go, you go. Where I eat, you eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is hard when everything that we seem to face in this world is just such a contradiction to the kingdom. And so it's it's navigating, like you were saying, we live in a time now where everything is relative, where truth is relative. And
Yeah. There is no truth.
There is no truth.
I define truth for myself. And
Right.
It's wait, what?
Yeah. And then the convenience or I guess the perceived benefit of that is I never have to be wrong.
Right.
And I can vilify you if you question me.
Yeah. And I never have to feel any form of conviction
Right.
because I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm not wrong, just this situation's wrong.
Right.
Or this way of doing things is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a weird place. And that's even where I think a lot of where we get caught up in, this sounds weird, but it's the reality of when someone presents something to me where the way I grow spiritually is not feeling bad for myself,
Mm-hmm.
I tell them they're wrong so I can just continue feeling bad about myself.
Oh, wow.
Because that's how I've grown, or that's how I've thought I've grown spiritually.
Wow. Yeah.
So oftentimes our rejection of the truth of the gospel and the truth of grace is not a rejection of Christ, but a rejection of having a way now not to feel bad about myself.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times when we think about grace and the law, our hesitation of grace is this idea of, okay, but I need to feel bad about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I don't, then what am I doing here?
Right.
That's
Yeah.
all I've ever known.
Yeah. Right.
And so we reject this thing. And so that's when truth becomes relative because, okay, well, that's true for you, but it's not true for me.
Right.
It's no, truth is not up in the air. It's not for debate.
Yeah. Right.
If you drive your car off a cliff, it's not my truth that it'll fly and your truth that it won't. It's going to hit the bottom.
Yeah.
There
Right.
are absolutes
Yeah.
in truth.
Yeah.
And Jesus literally describes himself as truth.
Right.
I
Yeah.
am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I am truth.
There is a foundation upon which truth is built.
Yeah.
And it's him.
And it's Jesus.
Yeah.
It's a person.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's this reality of grace is the enablement of his lordship to teach me truth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not the only thing grace is, but
Right.
grace enables me to submit to his lordship and go, teach me truth.
Yeah.
It's an empowering, enabling thing,
It is. Yeah. It's Katie and I talked about this last week, but grace is not just, it doesn't stop with just saying you'll be forgiven if you sin.
Yeah.
It's actually saying, so here we'll use this example. So in John 8, I think it's right at the beginning of John 8 is the story of the woman who was caught in adultery, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to say it's right.
Yes.
End of 7, beginning of 8, I think.
Yes.
And so there's the story of the woman caught in adultery. And, if you know the story, how it goes, it's, all the Pharisees are there and they're condemning her and, they're wanting to cast stones. And
Right.
Jesus, basically just rebukes them,
Yeah.
And then that story ends with, they all leave and Jesus looks at the woman and says, where are your accusers? And she says, well, they've left. And he says, well, neither do I accuse you,
Right.
And then he says, go and sin no more.
Yeah.
And it can be, if you don't understand his nature, it could be easy to read that and think that he's saying, no, don't do that again.
Right.
Like, I'll let you off this time, but like, don't do
Yeah.
it again.
I will kill
know?
you. It's like you see a parent with their kid, like, if you do that again, I will kill you.
Right. But what he's saying is, and what he's doing is he's imparting grace, because his grace isn't just saying, I have forgiven you this time. His grace goes a step further to say that I now empower you to live a life in which you don't have to resort back to this sinful nature, this sinful lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, the greatest lie we can believe is that we can get to a place where we live a life that is sinless.
Yeah.
It's a lie. It's available. It's real.
Yep.
That is a real thing. Jesus did not go and sin no more than look at the disciples and be like, she's not. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like go and sin no more. And he elbows Peter like, idiot.
Yeah,
she's going to sin.
Right.
It's this idea of this is a reality. There's a couple people he healed.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells them, go and sin no more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He tells the guy, even at the pool, I believe it's the guy at the pool of Bethesda, he says, go. It's one of them where he says, go, and do not sin, that you fall back into what you were in.
Right.
And there's this idea of like his commandment is real of sinlessness.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that I haven't sinned.
Right.
I'm not saying people are born sinless.
Mm-hmm.
Don't,
Right.
But that's an available reality.
Right.
And our current state of grace is what I have to kind of dip myself into every day, because no matter what, I'm going to sin.
Right. And thank goodness for grace, because I'm going to be a miserable sinner for the rest of my life, but his grace is what will allow me to get into heaven when I die.
Yeah, and grace is actually the platform I stand on and go, oh, I don't have to sin.
Right.
I don't actually have to sin at all.
Grace doesn't say you're forgiven when you sin. It also, it says that, but it also says, hey, you don't have to, by the way.
Yeah.
Because grace is his provision.
Yeah, because of this marvelous grace that we've been. And the original, like Greek, when it describes grace in most of Paul's writings, it says hyper grace.
Wow.
This hyper grace that we have now available to us.
Yeah.
It's a hyper working grace that is what I stand on and I walk on to look above what sin is and move into holiness.
Yeah.
The problem predominantly is that we associate sinning with living.
Sure.
So if I'm going to go eat meals, I'm eventually going to sin. If I'm going to have a job, I'm going to sin. If I'm going to be married, I'm going to sin. And holiness is going, I don't live.
Mm-hmm.
Holiness is like, monastic. I live in a mountain. I've shaved my head. There's no televisions.
Yeah.
All I do is pray. And so we associate sinning with living. And so if I'm going to live, I'm going to sin. But Jesus lived and didn't sin. Jesus ate meals. Jesus had friends. Jesus told jokes. Jesus made things. Jesus wore nice clothes.
Yeah.
Jesus taught. Jesus,
Yeah.
was a bit of a traveler, bit of
Yeah.
a one. Like all these things, Jesus lived and did not sin, and sinning and living are not associated. And so oftentimes we think that grace is this thing we need because, well, I have to live, so I'm going to have to sin.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how living is.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
No. You can actually live empowered by grace, and that's still living
Right.
and not sinning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sinning is not a part of the human or sin does not have to be a part of the human experience.
Right.
We make it.
Right. We have made human nature and sin nature synonymous,
Yes.
and they're not.
They're not.
And Jesus showed us that. He showed
Yeah.
us what the truest form of the human experience
The
is.
human experience. Yeah. Same thing with Adam and Eve. They were human.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't something and then they ate the I always want to say apple, but I know it's not an apple. They ate the fruit and then they became human.
Right.
They were human the whole time.
Right. And then they became a corrupted version of that.
Yes, exactly. But
Yeah.
but the human experience does not have to be one that maintains a life of sinfulness.
Right.
It's not human to be sinful.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and, the question I often ponder, because people love to push up against this,
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And the question I love to ask is, okay, well, can you name one sin that you've ever committed that you had to?
Right.
And you can't really answer that question.
Yeah.
Because there's not really such thing as a sin that you have to commit,
No.
as if there's no other option,
No.
And
No.
so it's well, okay, so maybe then there's a way for his grace
Yeah.
to pull us into a place where we recognize that actually sin is a choice and we are now empowered to choose not
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and and the difficulty is oftentimes Jesus's lordship feels like the denial of self-gratification.
mm,
And that's not true. It
Yeah.
leads back to that idea
yeah,
that to accept his lordship is to deny self-gratification because we've perverted things like, to accept Christ and deny myself.
mm-hmm.
And to deny myself is the reality of denying the person that I've told myself that I am,
Oh, wow.
not the person that I am.
Wow.
Because self-righteousness is defining for myself, dikainousene, the state
Right.
I ought to be in.
Right.
So when I deny myself and accept Christ, what I'm doing is allowing Christ to show me who I am.
Mm.
And oftentimes our perversion is I accept Christ, which means everything I want to do, I can't do and I can't be.
Mm-hmm.
And so God's going to turn me into this boring Republican, and and it's just going to be awful. And that's just not the case.
Mm-hmm.
It's God showing you who you are.
Right.
I'm denying the image of myself that I have carved for myself and returning the clay to the potter's wheel so that he can form it.
Right. That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can even remember times in my life where I was like, I don't really want to know what the Lord's plan is for my life. Or I don't want him to tell me who I am because I'm terrified that he's going to ask me to do something like move to Africa, move to the Middle East,
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like, well, if he did do that, it would be because he knew that would be the best thing for you.
100%.
And if,
There's things I've given up for the Lord that I don't matter.
Right.
They just don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment, it felt like the end of my literal existence.
Yeah.
But they don't matter.
Yeah.
Even it's funny when you go through a season of extreme busyness
Mm-hmm.
and you can't watch the shows you normally watch or you're not reading the things you normally you're just busy, so you're having to go do things and then you go to bed.
Yeah.
You do things, you go to bed, and eventually you go what's weird? I don't necessarily miss those things.
Right.
I'm somehow gonna go back to them probably.
Right.
But I can live without them.
Yeah.
And you realize existing is so much we think without this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna die.
Yeah.
Without Chick-fil-A, I'm just gonna be dead inside.
Yep. You'd be surprised what we can live without and still be completely content.
With just the Lord, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
That's a hard reality.
And that's the context of when Paul says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. People love to pull that verse right out of context.
Yeah.
But he says that as he's talking about, guys, I have learned how to, I've gone with lack And I've had little, I've had lack, and I've had extreme abundance. And I assure you that I was content in both.
Yep.
Because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
I think a great way to tell when someone has built wealth off of blessing from the Lord and someone has built wealth off of self effort is the value in which they find their wealth.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Find someone who sees their identity, their value, everything about them is that they're wealthy, and you'll find someone who built wealth out of self-effort.
Yeah.
Find someone who's simply been blessed by the Lord, and if all that was gone tomorrow, doesn't matter.
And they'd still be happy.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Old New Balance shoes, doesn't matter.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's just a difference in the contentness simply in Christ and existing.
Yeah. And Paul wasn't saying it's wrong to have abundance.
No.
But he's saying, I've been there and I've experienced lack. And turns out I was okay in both.
Doesn't matter.
I was totally content either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I gain, I'll use it to cultivate kingdom.
Right.
And if I lack, I'll still cultivate kingdom, just a different way.
Yeah. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this feels
like a great stopping
There's
place.
always it does. There's always
you could go for
so
another
many,
hour.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. But we'll
be back next week.
We'll call it here. We'll pick up next week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, this was fun. It was fun having you back.
Yeah, good to be back. If you're listening, Benjamin, Dad loves you. Just kidding.
Also go to bed.
Yeah. Also go to bed.
Okay. Cool. Well,
Awesome.
To all who listened and watched, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we love you, and we'll see you next week.